Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. Reminding you to join us and follow us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/This Week in America. Dr. Stephen Shrewsbury was an English family doctor before moving to pharmaceutical medicine, becoming a serial chief medical officer to West Coast biotech companies. He's written a book, Defy Your DNA, about what he calls gene patches. And that's what we'll talk about on today's This Week in America. Dr. Shrewsbury, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Rick, and good day to you.
Well, it's a really important topic, and let's go back and talk about how you had a sudden career change. This whole program began back when you had a son who was diagnosed as having a rare kidney disease. Talk about that, how that broadened your perspective and actually got you into studying this in the first place.
Well, Rick, it was 20 years ago, nearly 21 years ago, and you're right. I had a son imminently arriving with a rare disease, and it was clear that I couldn't continue to work as an English family doctor. I was going to spend a lot of time taking my son in and out of hospital. Happily, at that particular time, one of the UK's largest and best-known pharmaceutical companies was interested in acquiring my services, and so I moved career really from family practice to pharmaceutical medicine, and haven't looked back since. 21 years, I've enjoyed pretty much every moment of it, and it has allowed me to move to the US, and as you point out, I'm now firmly established and enjoying life on the West Coast, currently up in Vancouver, Canada, but most of the last 13 years have been in Washington, Oregon, or California. And my last role was for a company called AVI Biopharma, now called Sarepta Therapeutics, and they were developing some of these gene patches that are medicines that I think have the most amazing potential. I think they're more like the greatest breakthrough in medicine since the discovery of penicillin, because at last we will be able to tackle some really rare diseases and some really difficult diseases, and we will be able to patch the message that comes from our gene to the rest of the cell and either start generating a missing protein or stop generating a disease-causing protein.
This has to be an exciting time for you because you're on the cutting edge now. When you're talking there, I mean, this is the absolute latest. And as you say, you may be working with people that have the keys to reversing and preventing disease.
Absolutely, Rick. And that's really a great opportunity for medicine to, at last, push back the frontiers for many of these diseases that have been a challenge for us for centuries, millennia. And interestingly, the first of these gene patches has already been approved. It was approved last January. It's called Mipamersan. It's available for treating people with a particularly rare and difficult type of high blood cholesterol that causes very early and lethal heart disease. So the first of these is actually already marketed, and there are many others in development, and there are a number of other companies continuing with development work, and over the next few years, a lot more of these so-called gene patches, their technical name is oligonucleotides, or oligos for short, a lot more of these will become available, and it'll be really exciting to see them as they develop and change the face of what doctors can do, particularly as at the same time more and more genetic information is becoming available. So it's a marriage of more information becoming available and the medicines to tackle those diseases.
I want to talk specifically about the gene patch. Before I do that, again, the book is Defy Your DNA, How the New Gene Patch Medicines Will Overcome Your Greatest Health Challenges. Our guest on the program, the author, is Dr. Stephen Shrewsbury. His website is very simple to remember, defyyourdnabook.com. Information available, and you can link on at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Let's talk briefly about DNA, what exactly that is. And I've sort of thought DNA is pretty much what you're born with, is what you have the rest of your life. And is it actually possible to defy your DNA?
Yes, Rick, and you're quite right. DNA does determine who we are. It is the genetic blueprint that is passed down to us from our parents. But you know, as in many processes in life, it's not passed down perfectly in every occasion. So some people do get born with mutations to their DNA. And of course, sometimes those mutations do get passed down through generations and they lead to disease. So there are both spontaneous mutations and genetically inherited differences in our DNA. And basically, the DNA controls the message that goes from the cell nucleus to the rest of the body.
What are the gene patches then, and how do they work?
So when the message comes from the gene, the message can sometimes be a program for either a bad protein to be made, or it can just miss out a message for a good protein to be made. And the exciting technology that these gene patches represent is interfering with that message. It does not affect the underlying gene, but it affects the message that comes from the gene to the rest of the cell. So I've likened it in my book to the DNA basically being a library book. And what this patch is controlling is the way that the copy of a certain message is made and then sent out from the library to the factory in the outer part of the cell. It's just altering the message. It's not touching that book in the library, but it is making sure that when the message gets to the manufacturing plant, something good could be made from it.
What are some of the possibilities? In the book, Defy Your DNA, and the one chapter, Big Ones, you talk about being useful in the fight against heart disease and cancer, the things that scare so many of us. Let's talk about possibilities.
Well, absolutely. So heart disease, as I indicated, probably not what everyone thinks of as heart disease, because heart disease is probably hundreds, if not thousands, of different genetic diseases when they're actually really focused in on. So the first one, this very rare form of high blood cholesterol, is a perfect example where a new gene patch has been made that will help in turning back the tide of high cholesterol in those patients that suffer from it. Other diseases, so I was working on a disease, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is a horrible disease. It affects boys, and they basically lose the power in their muscles, and they die slowly over a period of about 20 years. By about the age of 8 or so, they're often in wheelchairs. In their mid-teens, they may be on a ventilator for their breathing, and in their early 20s or so, they will often be completely paralyzed and die from heart disease and from heart failure. And the gene patch that was being made replaces the protein that's missing in those muscles. This has never been possible before, and it's very exciting. And in fact, my former company continues every now and then to release encouraging news, and people can track some of these messages through the book's website, because I do tweet them. And it's really very encouraging that the progress that's been made with this particular gene patch, and hopefully Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a lot of Duchenne boys will be eventually treatable with one or more of these particular types of gene patches.
The book is Defy Your DNA, How the New Gene Patch Medicines Will Overcome Your Greatest Health Challenges. The author is our guest on This Week in America, Dr. Stephen Shrewsbury. The website is defyyourdnabook.com. The book is available all across the country, and of course available as well as some very good information, very helpful information at defyyourdnabook.com. You talked about FDA approval. Let's talk about that process. What's been approved so far, and where we stand in getting more out there that can help us?
Well, Rick, the FDA have approved the first of these gene patches, Mipamersan, last January. As I mentioned, there are a number of others in development, and people may worry, well, why is it taking so long? And my last 20 years, and particularly the last 10 or so as chief medical officer for various biotech companies, have taught me that drug development is extremely complex, highly sophisticated, and very, very challenging. And the FDA are in a difficult position where they have to judge what is the right amount of safety information, what is the right type of efficacy information, of benefit, and how do they sort of weigh up the risks and the benefits of these new medicines. So the process has been very, very well defined, particularly for big drugs, for blockbuster drugs. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of these new gene patches could benefit patients, but really are probably not going to benefit from or not going to be suitable for taking through these big, huge regulatory programs. So there's a lot of work going on with the FDA and with some of the small companies developing these at the moment to see how the development of these new gene patches can be achieved appropriately.
What is the cost involved that we're talking about?
Huge. Unfortunately, for big drugs nowadays, it's often $1 billion to actually get a drug to market. Certainly upwards of 500 million. That is a vast sum of money, and many small companies and research groups obviously can't afford that. So they have to have help and support often from the big companies. For the new gene patches as they're coming along, they're pretty expensive at the moment, and they're very difficult to manufacture. But as more and more of them come on board, so the cost will fall. Remember, your flat screen TV, when it first came out, was very expensive. Now, pretty much everyone can afford a flat screen TV. The same will happen with the gene patches. And of course, as manufacturing scales up and more of them are made at more and more bigger and bigger quantities, so the cost will fall. And I hope eventually they will become very much more affordable, but they will still be probably more expensive than many of the drugs available these days. That's because the manufacturing is much more complicated. And payers and healthcare organizations will have to decide if the cost is justifiable. And my argument is that in most cases, the cost will be cheap compared to the cost of the untreated disease.
I was going to say, if you're looking at stopping heart disease, cancer, that type of thing, which, as you know, certainly can be extremely expensive, even if this is expensive, it's probably less so than actually fighting the disease.
You're right, Rick, and that's a really good point, and I hope the healthcare payers will realize that early on as some of these gene patches become available.
We've read a lot about getting a map of your DNA, and that sounds sort of science fiction for a lot of us as we listen to that. Is that something that we should do?
It's probably a little too soon to urge everyone to go out and get their DNA mapped, but I'm quite convinced that in time people will. And indeed, in 10, maybe 15 years' time, it may replace the blood tests that babies have now. When they're born, often you get a little prick on their heel, and a little drop of blood is put on a piece of like blotting paper and sent off to the lab to look for some rare diseases. Well, in future, you may not need to do that. Maybe all you'll need to do is take a little swab of the inside of a baby's cheek and send that off. And instead of looking for 6 diseases, it'll look for 600, 6,000, maybe even 100,000 potential diseases. And we'll be able to determine not only if the baby has got it, but if they haven't, will they get it? And if so, when will they get it? I mean, the mapping possibilities down the line are huge and very, very exciting. But there's a lot of work that needs to go in for society to adjust to the amount of information that will become available, and for doctors to know how to advise their patients on how to interpret it and what to do with it.
Defy Your DNA is the name of the book. Defy Your DNA, How the New Gene Patch Medicines Will Overcome Your Greatest Health Challenges. The website is defyyourdnabook.com. A lot of good information on the website. You can buy the book there as well. In the final chapter in your book, To Infinity and Beyond, it really, when you look at that, it sounds maybe a little far-fetched, a lot of speculation about where we're going to go with this. How optimistic are you that we actually will see truly revolutionary breakthroughs?
Well, Rick, we are seeing truly revolutionary breakthroughs almost every day. I mean, medicine has become so incredibly exciting. And in fact, my 2 oldest children are both now qualified doctors, and they are practicing a world apart, a world away from what I practiced even when I qualified. So, for instance, some of the things that are mentioned in that last chapter are robotic surgery. And people may think, come off, when's this going to happen? Robots operating on you? It's already happened. We have already seen amazing robotic surgery with a surgeon on one side of the world and the surgical instruments being manipulated by machines on the other side of the world. So that is fact already. Another is laboratory-grown organs. For instance, there's a group in North Carolina that have developed the ability to grow bladders in the laboratory and have already started using those bladders to replace diseased organs in people. So those are just two examples where science fiction is actually science fact. I think there'll be many more fictional stories that will turn out to be fact in the years ahead.
The book is Defy Your DNA. The website is defyyourdnabook.com. Our guest on the program, Dr. Stephen Shrewsbury. Did you have any idea 20 years ago when you started on this process that you'd end up sitting on a program like this today talking about what's truly, truly earth-shattering medical news here?
No, I didn't, Rick, and it's very pleasant to talk to you, and thank you for the invitation.
Our pleasure.
20 years ago, I was, enjoying being a family doctor, and through circumstances, I joined the pharmaceutical industry, and as I say, it's been generally a very exciting experience for me, developing tomorrow's medicines. It really has enabled me as a doctor to try and help humanity copy and cope with some of the most terrible diseases on the planet. And I continue to do that, and I continue to enjoy it. The gene patches are just one small part of that, but I think it's a small part that in time will establish a really important place, partly because they are tackling diseases that none of the other medicines are able to tackle.
Where do you see this going, let's say, in the next 10 years with gene patches, which we have out there now, and as you say, they're evolving on an ongoing basis? Where are we going to be 5-10 years from now?
Well, I think in 5 or 10 years' time, a lot more of these gene patches will actually have achieved approval, and there will be a subset of doctors and a subset of diseases where they have become accepted treatments for. And the exciting thing is that over time, I think we will start treating diseases much earlier in the process. So the diseases that now only get picked up when they've already ravaged the human body,
right,
we'll start being able to detect them or even predict them years before they start causing problems. And we'll be able to intervene and prevent them from causing those terrible diseases. So that's a really exciting change in the way doctors and patients will experience disease.
So we're really looking at truly individualized, personalized medicine.
Yes, indeed. These are personalized right down to the gene level, and indeed even within the gene to a tiny, tiny little portion of that gene. And it's really only correcting 1 or 2 letters in a sentence that's actually the blueprint for a specific protein later on in the cell. And these are very, very highly targeted, very specific medicines. And ideally, and I think theoretically, they will be very safe, they will be very well tolerated, they won't produce adverse events. And so I think the whole way that medicine currently is practiced will change, because a lot of medicine now, unfortunately, has sometimes rare, but sometimes not that rare, side effects. And I think we'll see that with these new medicines, these new gene patches in particular, a lot of the suffering for side effects will go away, will be a thing of the past.
You talk in the book Defy Your DNA and the website defyyourdnabook.com, going from, a lot of this is plausible to now stepping into possibilities where it's actually going to happen. We're real close to this, aren't we? I say we like I had something to do about it. You're real close to this, aren't you?
Well, I'm no longer working for a gene patch company, but I'm still very involved in the science behind it. I've been part of a think tank that's an industry-wide panel of people that come together on a regular basis to discuss the safety issues and work with the regulators. And just last September, in Washington, we reviewed a lot of the clinical data that was coming out of these programs. And as I mentioned, the data is very exciting for some of these gene patches. And we are close to having, I think, a whole range of them potentially going to the FDA for them to consider their approval. So it is exciting times, and I think doctors need to start learning about these medicines so that when they become available, they know who is going to benefit from them, how to prescribe them, and how to actually make sure that the right patients are receiving the right medicines. And that's going to be done on a very personal basis. So that's exciting times.
Dr. Stephen Shrewsbury has been our guest on This Week in America. The book is Defy Your DNA, How the New Gene Patch Medicines Will Overcome Your Greatest Health Challenges. Defy Your DNA, the website defyyourdnabook.com. Log on to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on and get all of that information. It truly is exciting for people out there who have people that are looking at probably an hereditary issue. That's something that could be addressed with gene patches as well. It's an exciting time. Doctor, thank you for sharing that with us. We will be checking to see how things are progressing. Great to have you with us on the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Good day to you.
You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.
You're listening to This Week in America with Rick Bratton. More after this.